conversations. This is a safe space. This is a space of no judgment, of no blame, shame, or guilt. We want everybody, we want to hear everybody's perspective. We want to hear from you. If you have questions, ask your questions. If you have comments, make your comments. This is the place, this is where it begins. This is where reconciliation begins, when we start having conversations. So please feel free to add your perspectives. It is our belief as the Specs movement that we learn by listening to other perspectives, that speaking up and being transparent and sharing our story is imperative. And we have to understand that there's a history that we have to understand in order to understand everyone's story, okay? So any questions or comments so far about who we are as the Specs movement? All right, very cool. All right, so let me just give you a little rundown of what we're gonna do tonight. So we're gonna show you a short clip, about 10 minutes, in a few minutes, that is a summary of the movie that you guys have watched. And it's Ruby Bridges actually talking now in modern times. I think it was from 2017, telling a little bit about her story. Then we're gonna come back and we are going to put out a series of questions that are designed to encourage conversation. All right, so we'll put those out. What you can do is, if you want to make a comment or anything to one of the questions, there's a way to raise your hand on Zoom. And Trey, how is that? How do they raise their hand on Zoom? You're on mute.
Okay,
oh, there
so
you go.
On the bottom of your screen, you'll see on the right-hand corner, reactions. And so if you click that, let's say Anna says something brilliant, which she often does. You can just put a little thumbs up to say, hey, that was brilliant. Or if you want to ask a question, we'll use this other option, which is actually a clap action, option. But yeah, we'll just use that as a hand raising option if maybe you have a question or you want clarification on something. And so it's kind of like you're raising your hand like this, you know. And so yeah, that's how the reactions work.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir. We also have a chat box. So if you don't want to make a comment out loud, you are free to use the chat feature. Down the bottom, you'll see a little bubble that says chat. If you click that, it will open up. Make sure where it says to, it says everyone, so everyone can see your chat, see your question or your comment. And we've got our team here who are going to be monitoring the raised hands, and we're going to be monitoring the chat. Okay. After that, then we'll go ahead and wrap up. All right. What questions do you guys have about what we're doing here tonight? All right, excellent. All right, Trey, I am going to go ahead and ask you to play the clip. I'm not getting volume, Trey.
All of these people. When we turned the corner, I saw all of these people.
November 14th, 1960. It was 6-year-old Ruby Bridges' first day of school at William Frantz Elementary in New Orleans.
I remember them chanting 2, 4, 6, 8, we don't want to integrate.
It had been 5 years since the U.S. Supreme Court mandated the desegregation of schools. Now Washington was putting pressure on Louisiana and other states that had yet to comply. In a veiled attempt to appear compliant, city officials in New Orleans gave 150 black kindergartners an entrance exam, one they had no chance of passing. But 6 of the 150 passed that test. Ruby was one of them.
Everybody was coming over and congratulating my parents. She's so smart, she passed, we're so proud of her. So I actually thought that I was so smart that I passed this test that would allow me to go from first grade to college.
3 girls, including Ruby, were selected to attend William Frantz Elementary. But by the first day, the other 2 girls had dropped out, making Ruby the only black student in the school.
My parents only said, Ruby, you're going to go to a new school today, and you better behave. There was a knock at the door. My parents opened the door, and 4 very tall white men were standing at the door. And I remember looking at them and thinking, well, who are they?
Those 4 men were United States Marshals sent under order of President Eisenhower. Their job was to escort Ruby to and from school. One of the men was Charles Burks.
Well, we had a lot of demonstrations against what we were doing. The main thing was just be sure nothing happened to her. So we'd tell her, just stay close to us. We'll be all right.
There were barricades everywhere. There were cameras everywhere. I thought I'd stumbled into a parade. I actually thought it was Mardi Gras.
It didn't seem to bother her any. She was just doing what she had been told to do.
Ruby's mother went as well. Once inside, they were taken to the principal's office where they stayed all day. There, they watched white parents scramble in and out of classrooms, taking their children out of school.
500 kids walked out of school that day. And I didn't know what was going on because nobody explained anything to me. Finally, the bell rang and someone came into the office and they said, school is dismissed. You can leave. And I remember sitting there and thinking, wow, college is easy.
By the next day, the crowds had doubled.
They kept pointing at me and shouting. I kept saying, we're going to poison her. We're going to hang her.
I was in favor of what we were doing. I knew what we were doing was right, and we were going to make sure it happened.
This time, Ruby was taken to a classroom.
I remember looking into that classroom, and all I saw was empty desk. I didn't see one child.
But there was one person there, her teacher, Barbara Henry. Coming from Boston, she was the only one willing to teach Ruby.
I remember looking at her and thinking, she's white. I'd never seen a white teacher before. She looked exactly like the people outside. She wasn't. I always say that she showed me her heart.
The following week, students started to return. But the principal confined Ruby to her classroom and didn't allow her to play outside or eat in the cafeteria.
I remember going to the back of the classroom to sharpen my pencil, and you could look onto the playground. There was these huge oak trees, swings and slides and basketball goals. And I kept thinking as I sharpened my pencil, where are the kids?
By the end of the school year, the protests had disbanded, and Ruby was finally allowed to meet the other children.
I finally found them, I was so excited. So I went in to play with them. This little boy looked at me and he said, I can't play with you. My mom said not to play with you because you're a nigger. So that's what this is about. It's not Mardi Gras. This isn't college. It's about me. It's about me and the way I look and the color of my skin. And in my mind, that was okay. Yes, he hurt my feelings, but I wasn't angry with him because I felt like he was explaining to me why he couldn't play with me. If my parents said, Ruby, don't play with him. He's Asian, Hispanic, Indian, Muslim, white, mixed race, Jewish, gay. I would not have played with him. I didn't feel like there was anything for me to forgive. The fact that in my mind, he was explaining to me and that I would have done the same thing. It wasn't like I was angry with him, so there was nothing there to forgive. The fact that when I passed the crowd, I thought it was Mardi Gras. There was nothing there for me to forgive.
Standout design.
Oh, we have a commercial. That's funny.
Trends start with you. Canva is the free design platform that can help you bring your ideas.
Ruby returned the following year. She had a new teacher and a room full of classmates. She went on to attend an integrated high school and eventually graduated from Kansas City Business School with a degree in travel and tourism. And when she married and began raising a family, she taught her children to rely on God.
She always falls on her faith, and she makes sure that you do so as well. So it doesn't matter what you go through, doesn't matter who hates you, who dislikes you. As long as you have that faith and that relationship with God, you're fine.
Ruby returned to William Franz Elementary in 1993 when she enrolled her 4 nieces. She witnessed the same racism she had seen as a little girl. So to build bridges between the races, she volunteered as a parent liaison and established an after-school multicultural art club. Soon after, she launched the Ruby Bridges Foundation and began sharing her story with students all over the U.S.
I see hope that most of us don't see. I'm in schools every day. I am so humbled by the way my story moves kids. It's so simple. How Mrs. Henry didn't judge me. How all I wanted was a friend. Kids get that. They understand that. Our kids know nothing about racism. It's us as adults. We take racism and we pass it on to our kids. And that's why it's still around. Each and every one of us come into the world with a clean heart. I believe that if we are going to get past our racial differences, even today, it's going to come from our kids.
It's been over 55 years since Ruby walked up those steps and took her place in history. Today, her legacy continues to make a difference.
I was happy to see what she did because I knew it could be done. I've always told Ruby that. I'm glad I was there, able to have something to do with it.
To have equality, it takes someone with courage to make that change so that we can come together. And you have to have a great, faithful foundation to stand up for something that you truly believe. My superhero, she does that every day.
Out of the commandments, if you could only keep one, the one you should keep is love thy neighbor. That is the key. And I have to care about you as a person and a human being. I really believe the longer I live that it really has everything to do with love.
All right, thank you for that. That was an amazing summary of Ruby telling in her own words what she thought as a child and what was going through her mind. And I thought that was amazing supplement to the movie we had all watched. But let's go ahead and start asking some questions. So the first question we have is, what surprised you most about Ruby's story? What surprised you most?
From the one she just told or the whole story?
The whole story, anything from the movie or from the one she told, anything is fine.
From the one she just told, because I had watched that video earlier after I'd seen the movie. I was just researching some things. The 1993, going back to the same school, dealing with racism again when she tried to take her nieces back. You would have thought she would have been celebrated, that would have been an honor, that she would bring them back to that place. And I'm just either very, very naive or I was just mortified. to hear her say that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. What else? Who else? What else surprised you? What surprised you most about the story?
I had heard about Ruby Bridges and knew she deserved sainthood because we watched a Mr. Phil show that mentions her as one of the saints over the last 2 millennia. But I actually, what shocked me, and I didn't realize that the entire school emptied out. I had no, until I saw this movie, I had no idea that the entire school emptied out for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
in response to it, and that shocked me at the hatred and whatever the ignorance of the people that were going to that school.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think I knew that either. I think I was shocked at that as well. And I think it was almost the whole year, almost the entire year. I know she was in a classroom by herself for an entire year, but for a lot of the year, unless if I'm not remembering right, people, or a lot of at least a part of a few months, people were removing their children from school, and that was very surprising to me. And I'll share what was surprising to me also. Of course, we grew up, we were hearing the story and things like that. That this was almost in my lifetime. Now, it was a few years before I was born, just a couple years, but this woman, this is my lifetime. This is an ancient history. This is something that has happened, and some of the people on this call within your lifetime. That was my surprising point. What else do we have? What else was surprising to you?
And I was probably going to chime in with what you said. The first thing was, I've heard of the Little Rock Five, and, I knew there were things going on in Alabama and Georgia, things like that. But I actually attended first grade in New Orleans in 1966, and wasn't aware that kind of hostility even existed then. I know it was 6 years prior to that point, but I was going to an integrated school in New Orleans at the time, and there wasn't any of that sort of thing going on. So I was really kind of surprised that really existed there, because I always thought it was happening everywhere else, because we'd always see about the fire hoses, the dogs and stuff, and we know that was in George Wallace's era and stuff, but I didn't know that existed, because there was, the people that lived in New Orleans, everybody was either really dirt poor, or the opposite side of that. So you had the class issues going on over there. So you just kind of wondered where the discrimination would kind of come into, because there were certain things you just didn't have the ability to do anyway. So there wasn't any need to have to separate blacks and whites, because just the social divisions were enough to keep that separated. Other than that, living in that area and living in the New Orleans area, the only technical thing that I saw a fault with the movie was the neighborhood looked like it was filmed elsewhere, because that did not look like New Orleans. I know what New Orleans looks like, and those houses were Midwest. They were not New Orleans.
That's funny. That is funny. Absolutely. Yeah, sometimes we just don't know, but she was a catalyst for it. So maybe by the time you got there in 66, she had paved the way, so things were able to get started, so that people coming behind her didn't have to experience the same thing that she was experienced. Yeah, great comments.
True. And I think a lot of times parents have a tendency to shield things from you that you don't know. And saying like that back then, I was 6 years old. I don't think I would have understood the gravity of it. And that even made the story more compelling, simply because here's a 6-year-old girl going to school, and you've got these adults yelling at her, with an adult situation, adult problems, and a 6-year-old having to absorb all of this and then go on and try to go to school and do the things that she needed to do. And I thought that part was pretty scary. I thought that was diluted a little bit, but I know the show was kind of made kid friendly. But I couldn't imagine, walking into that situation every day to school with people you don't know just screaming and yelling at you the way they were. In the movie, they showed them spitting at her and things like that. And I don't know if they even tried to throw bricks or things at her. They probably took that out of the movie. But I'm sure some of those kinds of things even happened then.
Great points. Absolutely. Great points. Yeah.
Hey, Anna,
Any other? Yes.
yeah, I One thing that I wasn't aware of until I saw the movie, and I don't know whether it's true or not, but the impact that it had on the neighborhood and the rest of the family. I'd never heard anything about the fallout uh, because of internally the changes that happened within the neighborhood. So some of the neighbors were a little bit annoyed, but then the fact that her father lost his job and the store didn't want them to come in, so it was more of a wide-ranging effect than what I had realized before.
That is a great point. There are some things that come along with being the first at anything, from the other side that we don't often hear about. And I was surprised by that too, Ken. That was profound. But yeah, being the first at anything, you can get it from both sides. I mean, your neighbors are now on edge because the police are there barricading the neighborhoods and things like that. That can put you in a very, very tricky position. And I do see a hand up here, and I think that's Robert Julie.
We watched another documentary after we finished the movie that said that even her grandparents lost their land that they were sharing and they were kicked off. So it was very extreme. I didn't realize that at all.
Yeah. This work of reconciliation, or even being the first or just reconciliation, or just having trying to be a bridge between races, or having conversations, can come at a cost that we don't really know about. I didn't know that about the grandparents, Julie. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
The other thing that was in, Julie, I think maybe that same one was that her parents ended up separating. And that wasn't in the movie either.
No, I didn't realize that. No, I didn't realize that.
There are 3 or 4 other documentaries out there on YouTube. I saw the one that Julie saw. I saw the one that you just showed, and then there was yet another one. But
yeah,
and a really great one from the teacher as well. So
Mike and I were talking about that, about the perspective from a father. And Mike, you want to tell what we're talking about, perspective as a father?
Being a girl dad, first to have, am I gone?
Nope, you're there, honey.
Okay, everybody else
we can hear you. Oh, sorry.
You want to protect your child at all costs, and now she's asked to be the first little Black girl to change that system. Now you have to relinquish your power as a father of a little girl and let her go into the hands of other people that are sworn to do their duty, but they're not her father. As a father, you will give your last ounce, your last. And someone can say that's my duty and my honor and my job, but it's still, to let her go took an extreme amount of strength on his part to have his wife help him see the bigger picture. Because the one day that he wanted to go, those officers told him, said, "Sir, no, it would be best if you didn't, because you're a male figure and that would heighten it even more. And you're that child's father." So for him to relinquish that took a phenomenal amount of strength to just have enough faith in God that, I'm taking this out of my hands and I'm trusting and believing and putting it in your hands, which is huge. And to know the climate of the day back then, that took a lot. And I can see why it must have tore the family up, because we don't get to see we get to see the little heroic girl, but there's so many things behind it, like we've been saying earlier, that the rest of the world and public won't know.
Thank you. Very good. Absolutely.
Now, Mason had something that he observed during the film that he wanted to share.
Yes, Mason.
I thought it was interesting how they threatened to hang her and poison her and kill her.
Yeah. That was interesting. You're absolutely right. It was sad. It was scary. Can you imagine being that little and having to walk through that and being scary? And I know in the movie they said her mom or the gentleman said, just don't look back or don't listen. But that's hard to do, not to look back and not to listen. So she was incredibly brave. She was very, very brave.
Was she Hannah's age?
Yeah, Hannah's 6,
She
right?
might have been.
Yeah, 6. Yeah.
Well,
Hannah's 5, but she'll be 6 in November, so she's very close to Hannah's age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's amazing to me how you have a lot of, way back then, yeah, they showed the one lady talking about, oh, I can't teach a N-word or whatever. And no sooner than she said that, she got ready to say, God is good and God, Lord,
Bless her
we thank
lunch.
you.
Yeah.
Bless her lunch. And
Mhm.
that's the same hypocritical stuff that we're seeing today,
Mhm.
where we're seeing folks that claim the name of Jesus Christ, but at the same time can't love their brothers and sisters. But
Mhm.
they think that they're right and they're doing God's will.
Mhm.
There's a time now for those that seriously know the word of prayer and have faith that, the size of a mustard seed to move mountains, that we need to come together and pray, because this group of individuals, they're being tricked by the enemy, and they're not only destroying their lives and their future generations coming up, but those that are in the world that are lost.
Mhm.
They're seeing more of them and that foolishness than those that are righteous and blood washed. And we have to change that. We have to.
Amen.
And I would have to
Janet.
say a really shocking thing, though, the biggest surprise of the movie, which I made some assumptions, and then when I heard her interview, found out it was true, which was that she had no idea what was going on. Whereas we tend to sit down and have very open, very straightforward conversations and say, this is what you're doing, this is what's going to happen, try to give them, prepare them. She thought she was going to Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
Just shocking. Just, a different way of handling it, the way her parents chose to do it at that time. And when we were watching the movie, Julio and I said several times, that I wonder why they don't show the conversations that they had, or I wonder why, and it appeared that perhaps they didn't, that's the way they chose for it to be, that have that whole innocent, just, you're going to go to a new school and that's what it is. That's all there is. Which wasn't a very different approach from the way I parent, but she was a very kind-spirited, forgiving, didn't take it personally, hold grudges. Of course, the poisoning thing was scary for any child, but it was just surprising to me.
Yeah, that's true. That might have been a generational thing. And the same thing on the flip side of that, when you think about that, when she was talking with the psychologist, and she's like, I don't know what those people look like that are yelling at me because my mom told me not to look at them.
So I didn't.
Or so I didn't. Or so the young man or the boy in the class wouldn't play with me because his parents told him not to. So if my parents told me not to, neither would I. You know what I mean? I just thought that was very interesting. So let me ask this question. I'm gonna improvise a little bit. Has an authority figure tell you something that you later on feel like you don't agree with? And how did you handle that? An authority figure. So a lot of times we learn things. We learn things about race, about class, about gender, and things like that from authority figures, from our parents, from our pastors, and things like that. And we just take their word as bond, right? Has anyone ever come back later and realized that, ooh, maybe that wasn't quite right? Any thoughts on that?
Well,
I'll give you a story. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
If we went against our parents on something they said, we never would tell them because of the consequences that could happen. So I would say yes, we probably did. We just didn't ever tell it.
You never told it. Good. That's
Yeah.
probably good. I have a friend, I work with Michael Franks, and Michael Franks grew up in West Texas. He's older than I am. He's in his 60s. And great fellow, awesome fellow. But he says he remembers growing up in Texas when there were colored water fountains. And he said, Mom, and he's a white man. He says, Mom, why can't we drink from the colored water fountains? Why is that different? And she said, oh, because those people have diseases and things like that. Okay. So his mother is telling him something. And as he grew up and became a grown man, he was like, Mom didn't know what she was talking about. You know what I mean? So sometimes you have to research for yourself.
Anna, when I saw the movie, I couldn't understand why the adults, the mother and fathers would take such hostile hate toward a child. And then you doing that in front of your children, and you pulling them out of the school and they watching you. It has to have some type of mental effect because the students, they knew, that this wasn't right. And I just thought I couldn't get past the parent doing that to such an innocent little girl.
Exactly. But that's kind of how the way it was. And that's what I mean. This is what children are learning from authority figures. You know what I mean? Even if the authority figure isn't saying it, look what they're doing. And this is what children are learning from. Okay.
Right.
I've got a hand.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Let me get the hand I have at Julie and Rob, and then I'll come right back to you, Doreen.
My parents couldn't join, but they did have a couple comments. The first, I guess the most important relative to the authority figure, is they mentioned a conversation that they heard yesterday from Philip Yancey, who grew up in the South and had been taught wrongly by his parents. And then he proceeded in university to have a African-American professor. And that transformed his mind through that relationship and through the ability to be taught, from someone like that. So if anyone wants to, hear about that interview or watch that interview, I have the details from my parents. So.
That'd be great. Thank you, Rob. Yeah, you said a key word there, relationship. Go ahead, Doreen.
my apologies. I forgot to raise the hand.
That's all right. No worries.
I was going to piggyback on what the other gentleman was saying about, I think that would be my answer to the question, what was my shock? And I just think it was more just disbelief that people's disdain or hatred is so deep that they do these types of actions, where they're pulling the children out, or they're doing it in front of the children. And so it's just like, wow, it's just mind-boggling. That's what I think about it. That's all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know a lot of it was mind-boggling. I think Hideko has her hand up.
I was really amazed by the degree of hatred. We in Japan have the racial issue with Korean and Chinese between Japan. As I was growing up, we had Korean school and Japanese school, and we used to fight because of the racial problem. But it wasn't as bad as here, even today, between white and colored. I just maybe don't know enough of the history, but I'm amazed at the degree of the hatred.
Yeah, it is. It's strong. It's deep. It has a long history to it. That's why it's important that we understand the history. Yeah, that's right. It is amazing. It's amazing to us as well. All right, so let's go into another question. What qualities did you admire most in Ruby? I think you're on mute, Ms. Francine.
I admired the fact that she was well raised and she could forgive. Because as they were going in the door, remember they told, in the school door, they told her not to ever look back, but she broke loose from them and she ran back. And the psychiatrist had asked her, well, what were you saying to them? And she said she was saying, I forgive you for what you're doing. And I can't remember everything else, but that just went to my heart because all of the things that they are doing to her, and she could see that because they showed some ugly things, and it had a very bad effect on her. As you watch the movie, you know that her hiding her lunch and all of that, and she had forgiveness in her heart, and I know that was her background. Her parents had taught her how to forgive, and I thought that was very profound.
Amazing, absolutely. And I think Doreen and Malik had their hand up as well.
Yeah, that was pretty much exactly what she was saying. Just her faith in that she believed what her mother was telling her, which was believing in God, and then walking it out in actuality. So having to do that was just amazing. And even when the bedtime and she got up and had her nightmares, and her mom was telling her, go back and just keep praying, go back, they're like, good night. And oh my gosh, to just sit there and just,
I know.
Continue to just have faith that God's going to get you through it. So you just keep doing it, you keep doing it. So it's just very encouraging to keep just grounding your faith and building your faith in God continuously, whatever the trial, whatever the situation, whatever the struggle, whatever the moment is in your life today. Keep going, believe in God, have faith, stand, you know.
Yeah,
I was gonna
absolutely.
Say, she's resilient. Like she's resilient. So it happened when she was 6. She'll be 66 this year. This will be the 60th anniversary of it. She's got 6 decades of resilience, and she's at this time. I was just kind of going through my mind of the folks who were doing things were all adults at the time. So with Jackie Robinson was 13 years before her. He had to deal with that. Rosa Parks was 5 years before her. Brown versus the Board, they went as groups, and she's by herself. She's like a 6-year-old warrior who's going every day to this same school. And then the next year, I'm going to go. But even now, as one of the individuals said, when she went back with her nieces in '93 and saying, this can't be. We can't be going through this here 33 years later. So she has she's just got a resilient spirit. But I just watching a 6-year-old, we've had 3 6-year-olds at one time. It's just there's a level of resilience in a 6-year-old that I've not seen, and it's amazing.
It is amazing. I'm a 56-year-old, and I don't know that I would have that. I don't know that I would react that way. So yeah, she's an amazing person. She was an amazing child, an amazing person. Absolutely, absolutely.
Anna,
So yes,
that's why we know children are taught to hate, because you said you're telling your age, as you grow older, you see, but as a child, you don't have a spirit like that. That's why you know that children are taught to hate. They're not born to hate. They're taught that. So we know that it comes from the older generations. It doesn't come from young ones.
As evidenced by those adults yelling and screaming those hateful things in front of their children, right? And that's where, and so they don't know any better, but they're taught by the older generation. Yeah, you're right. They're taught. Absolutely, absolutely. So even as an adult, Ruby still says that Mrs. Henry is her best friend. What are the ways that we can try to be more like Mrs. Henry? And Mrs. Henry was her teacher. She was the only one, she was from Boston. She was the one who's willing to teach Ruby. So what are some of the ways that we can try to be like Mrs. Henry today?
We've got to stop looking at people at the color of them. We need to start looking at the content And she saw Ruby for what she was. She didn't see her as a black, blue, brown, yellow. She saw her as a child who knew and had a future. And so I believe that's what we have to do. We have to look. There are a lot of broken people, and it's not even skin color. It can be a person missing an arm or a leg, an eye, or whatever, and we look at them different. We have to stop looking at people different. We have to look at them as whole and complete.
Oh, I love that. That was good, Miss Francine. And I would agree with that, but I would go beyond that. I would say that it's okay to look at people as differently, but let's go ahead and appreciate people for their differences.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not equate the word different with wrong, because that's what we do. We say different and bad are synonymous, or different and wrong are synonymous, and that's not true. What we need to do is respect people for their differences. I see you the way you are. I see the way that God has made you, and I appreciate you the way God has made you. Let's learn what we can learn together here. Let's figure out what we can learn together. Okay. I saw a hand somewhere, and I think it was Julie and Rob.
It was, but we're
okay.
Talking too much.
You're fine. You're great.
So, these children notice all the differences, and they're very unashamed to ask questions about that.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point.
We're so easily offended by the questions, and kids ask the questions, all of them.
And what we want to do, and I would say that is part of the foundation of SPECS, or just the work that I do in diversity, equity, and inclusion, is we want to get to a place where it's okay to ask the questions and we are not offended by the questions. Let's assume that someone, when they ask us a question, let's assume they're coming from a good place, and let's educate people. Okay, so that's the whole point. It's about relationship. Rob mentioned the word relationship, getting to know each other, and getting to a place where it's okay that we can have these conversations. Right? Did I see another hand?
I'm going now.
Yes.
Probably can't see it from the background. Irene.
Okay, it's Irene. It's Irene.
Irene and me.
Okay.
Irene, you go first.
I think are you on mute, Irene?
She's on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute, Irene. Yeah, we can't hear you. No, we still can't. Oh, there you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, having taught kindergarten, one of the things that I thought was she was the age of children that I used to teach, and she was instrumental. The teacher was instrumental in ensuring that Ruby didn't have negative thoughts. And I also thought that the doctor was also important, because through the drawing, which is a great way to get children to speak about how they feel, the fact that he pursued it, he didn't just accept her initial drawings, and that he pursued it and helped her to talk through her feelings of anger. And the teacher, if she had been a teacher who was negative toward Ruby, I think as an adult, her feelings would have been much different.
Yep, very, very good point. I found it interesting, to your point, Irene, that she was hurting, as evidenced by the drawings that she made, but she wasn't acting out about it. Right. She wasn't disrespectful. She wasn't acting out. She was pleasant, but she was still hurting. So we have people that are hurting that we can't see it on their faces. That's why it's important to get to know each other. Great point, Irene. And Julia, I think you had a comment as well.
You're muted.
You're muted, Julia.
All right. Yeah, the door can hear me from the other room.
From the other room.
This is tying into what you had said earlier about, what things we could do. And thinking back on that era of the 60s that a lot of us had, remembered and grew up on, I remembered Sesame Street, and I read something about the kinds of things that the friction that they dealt with trying to air that show. you know, because it was one of the first shows. It was an educational show, but it also basically portrayed, you know, multiracial cultures all together in a single neighborhood. And that wasn't well received when it first came out. And one of the things that I had noticed even as a kid were the, you know, the Muppets that everybody had seen were not just black or white or Asian or Native American, but they were purple and pink and blue and orange. And, you know, they were dealing with learning numbers and letters and, you know, certain things. Everybody likes ice cream. I remember that song. And they showed more the similarities of people than they did the differences. You know, even though they were all different colors, they all got together and they were able to, you know, enjoy the same kinds of things. It's like, it doesn't matter if you're black and white or orange or whatever. We all like ice cream, or we're all trying to learn numbers. We're all trying to learn letters, or we're all trying to learn how to deal with big and small and, you know, far and near and all those kinds of things. And those are the things that were trying to be groundbreaking during that time as well. When it came to trying to learn how people are and finding out that we have more similarities than we did differences. And like I said, I think the point I was trying to bring up is the fact that I believe they deliberately made the Muppets multicolored and not specifically colored like, you know, human color, so that it would actually show, oh yeah, this is an Asian Muppet, or this is a, you know, black Muppet, or this is a white Muppet. They actually made them different colors. So you could deal with the diversity without having to specifically point out an ethnic culture with those kinds of things. And I thought that was pretty important during those days.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that too. And I appreciate Sesame Street, because not only do they have the different colored Muppets, but they have also Muppets that are disabled or have autism and things like that. And that's important too. That's another segment of diversity that we don't always talk about. But yeah, that's important too. Absolutely. Great point. Great point. Any other comments about being more like Mrs. Henry? Okay, all right. Last question of the night. Almost 60 years later, why is the story of Ruby Bridges important in 2020?
So, Anna?
Yes, sir.
So I think it's important today because you go back to 1960 when this happened, and what's happening now is the same thing that was happening to her and even to people before her. One of the commenters earlier alluded to Jackie Robinson and Ruby Bridges, and it was always important then to pick the right person, because a person who might have reacted differently, or her family who may have reacted differently, or if Jackie Robinson had reacted differently, it could have been seen as a failure. I think all those people, including the principal, when she made her comments about her scores were too high, so I'm going to lower them. You know, she didn't believe that this little black girl could score as high as she did. And so I think even today, black people, Latino people, and you know, we're still being underestimated. And so to me, that's one of the more important things. There are many important things there, because we can see almost a mirror of what's happening now, and to go back to what happened then. But I think the thing that stood out to me more was how easily it was for them to just underestimate and believe that, oh, this child has no chance, is that she couldn't do it unless you helped her.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a great point, Ken. That's still going on today. And I think I saw Nina's hand, and then I saw Trey's hand.
I think it's important today, especially because it is still going on, and it's heartbreaking knowing that this is still happening, and that young colored black boys and black girls are still getting like underestimated, and oh, you can't do that. It's heartbreaking hearing about that today. And I don't think that so many activists should have to go through what they did back then for this to still happen now.
Yep, great point, Nina. You're absolutely right. That is a fantastic point. Thank you for voicing what you have to say. Malik and Doreen, did I see a hand there?
Yeah, I was going to say it's important, almost like an echo of both, because the the target is different. So it doesn't matter if it's, as you said, if it's somebody who's differently abled or differently gendered or differently language or religious. The target is different, but there's a target. And I think also kind of leaning on Miss Henry as to why it's important. We all have opportunities to be either guardians or gatekeepers. So Miss Henry was a guardian, but the principal or whoever that was clearly a gatekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think some of the things that we see playing out now, not 100% of law enforcement, not 100% of teachers, not 100% of store owners, but you do see people who are acting more like guardians and gatekeepers and guardians. And really looking at like, what is your mission? If your mission is to protect and serve, but not harm, or what is your mission? Your mission is to instruct. And if a child for teachers doesn't meet your internal framework of advanced placement or accelerated or what have you, your role is not to be the gatekeeper. Your role is to instruct, because your license isn't to be gatekeeper. Your license is to be a teacher. So advance that child who does not look or does not speak or does not fit the box that you mentally have. And I think it's for us to help them do that.
Yeah. That's a great point. That's something that went on in our lifetime. Our oldest was always in an accelerated course, always in an advanced course, and we always had to go and have a conversation with her teacher beforehand to let them know what the deal was. Otherwise, underestimated. Trey, I think I saw your hand up.
I was just giving a thumbs up, saying that that was good. The guardian and gatekeeper was that's brilliant, and as well as Ken's statement of how Black and brown people are still being underestimated today. Just great stuff. Great stuff.
Great stuff, guys. Thank you so much. I want to be very, very respectful of everyone's time, and we're coming up upon the 8 o'clock hour. So I just want to wrap up. Did anyone else have any other questions or comments that they'd like to put out there before we wrap up? Yes, sir. Mike.
The last conversation here has been really interesting to me about the underestimation. Maybe it's my computer. It's been very interesting to hear what you had to say about being underestimated. And I thought an idea just came through my head as if you still are looking for agenda items, perhaps the movie Hidden Figures would be a good one to discuss sometime.
Yeah, that's a great movie. We do have that on our agenda for going forward too. We're definitely going to put that on there, but thank you. That's a great suggestion. And if you guys haven't seen it, even if we don't pull it out and do a discussion about it, watch it. It's amazing. It's amazing. It really is. So any other comments or questions before we wrap up?
I have one more.
Yes.
Back up to the final question, why is this important? I think that the forgiveness and the grace and the attitude that she faced all of the opposition with is so important in our culture right now. It is so lacking. It's just, we all need to take the lesson from her and how to respond to difficult circumstances.
Absolutely. Absolutely. She was an amazing, amazing person. She still is. All right, guys. So that is all we have. Specs team, anybody else have anything else they want to say? Any other comments before we close out? We good? Okay. All right. So amazing conversation tonight, guys. Thank you so much. This has been great. I'll be thinking about it. It'll be on my mind, and I'll be thinking about it for the whole week and beyond. So thank you for that. The very next event that we're going to have is going to be on Sunday, the 15th of November, and we're going to be talking about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a Lutheran pastor. He was a theologian, and he was an anti-Nazi dissident. We'll put out some more details about that on the Specs movement, but that is going to be the same time, 7 p.m. on Sunday, the 15th of November. We would love to have you guys back and to hear from you guys. We did record this session tonight, and our thought was perhaps to put it on the Specs movement website. If anybody's adverse to that, if you prefer not to have your comments or your face on the website, shoot us an email at the spexmovement@gmail.com. I think that's still the email address, Trey. And we will absolutely blot your face out, remove your comments, or whatever the case may be. Other than that, thank you guys again. And we hope to see you guys next time. All right, take care. Bye, guys.
Thanks for the suggestion on the movie. It was amazing. Thanks.
Good, thank you. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. Bye to my sissies.